Face centered. 1 sec. Face center. Stop recording video. Button.
Hello, this is going to be my presentation for my writing class. For my topic, I decided to focus on
Your top
sleep
edge.
paralysis. I actually had an encounter, I had this happen
Centered.
to me a couple weeks ago,
Your top edge.
so I just thought, hey, why not
One
learn
phase near
more
top edge.
about it? I thought it was a pretty
Centered.
odd thing, and so yeah, I
Your
just
top edge.
decided to do some research on it, and here we are. So,
Centered.
what is sleep paralysis? Well,
Your top edge.
in its most basic
Centered.
form, sleep
Your
paralysis
top edge.
is when you're in between the
Centered.
states of awake and asleep.
Your top edge.
Usually when people,
Centered.
go to sleep, they're either
Your top
fully
edge.
asleep, and then when they wake up, they're fully awake.
Centered.
But sleep
One
paralysis
phase near
is
top edge.
kind of when you're caught in the middle
Centered.
of those two
Your top edge.
consciousnesses. Is that a word?
Centered.
And it's
Your top edge.
really the most noticeable thing that you'll experience is you won't
Centered.
be able to move
Your
most
top
of the
edge.
muscles in your body. Now,
Centered.
thankfully, you'll be able to move your
Your
respiratory
top edge.
muscles, so, to breathe, that's pretty important, right?
Centered.
And you can also move your
One
ocular
phase near top edge.
muscles, so you'll be able to look around,
Centered.
but
Your
pretty
top edge.
much every other muscle in your body you won't be able to move. So in the moment,
Centered.
it's a really scary thing to deal with. I mean, you
Your
wake
top
up
edge.
and you can't move, right? That's
Centered.
I'm sure that's a pretty
Your
concerning
top
thing.
edge.
It was for me when I first
Centered.
dealt with it.
Your top edge.
But for the most part, that's the symptom that
Centered. One phase near
everyone
top edge.
reports.
Centered.
But there are other symptoms that can be
Your
really,
top edge.
really scary and
Centered.
nerve-wracking, and those come in the forms of hallucinations. So people who have or
Your top
had
edge.
sleep paralysis report
Centered.
sometimes having hallucinations of things
Your top
like
edge.
figures, shadowy
Centered.
figures, in their
Your
room,
top edge.
or
Centered.
malevolent presences, as this study I looked at called them.
One phase centered. Your top edge.
Most of these presences they're, like I said, unnerving, described
Centered.
as evil, malevolent,
Your top edge.
and they can
Centered.
do a few different things.
Your top edge.
Sometimes they'll just stand
Centered.
there and look at you. That's been a reported thing. But they can also do things like make you feel like you're
Your top edge.
being attacked or even assaulted or even sexually assaulted. So yeah, really, really scary stuff. And
One
it's
phase near
also
top
been
edge.
reported that some
Centered.
people can experience out
Your
of
top edge.
body and an out of body
Centered.
experience, which is basically when you
Your top
feel
edge.
like your consciousness is floating above your body, which can be really
Centered.
unnerving and disturbing. So that's a symptom that some people
Your top edge.
report. And yeah, I think those are the major symptoms. Now,
One phase centered.
thankfully, these sleep paralysis episodes don't really
Your top edge.
last too long. They can last from a few seconds up to
Centered.
about 2 minutes. That's been the most reported time that I've come across. So yeah, that's about the length of time they last. And they when you wake up from them,
Your top edge.
you're usually people report that they're usually kind of disoriented, maybe a little, scared, nervous, because they don't know what just happened, right? If it's
One
their
phase centered.
first time having that happen to them, they're gonna be
Your top edge.
very unnerved.
Centered.
But it is, when you wake up from it,
Your
you're
top
out
edge.
of it until you go
Centered.
back to sleep if you're unlucky
Your top
and it
edge.
happens again. Which has actually been reported. Some people actually experience this, a lot throughout their life. About 40% of people, 30 to
Centered.
40% of the population,
One phase near
overall in
top
the
edge.
world, has reported it
Centered.
happening to them once.
Your top edge.
But some
Centered.
people have it really
Your
bad
top edge.
and report it happening once
Centered.
every night, or twice a
Your
week, or
top
3
edge.
times a week, or even more than that.
Centered.
And this is really scary because not only is that, unnerving to the person having to go through it, but it can also cause them to develop sleep disorders. And those can be really bad. So like just sleep disorders, sleep deprivation, just not wanting to go to sleep because you don't want to go through that.
Take picture. Stop. Face near top edge. 5 minutes. 5 minutes.
And yeah, so they can last, like I said, about up to 2 minutes, but
near top edge.
But even still, going through that like once every night would just be exhausting, and it can, like I said, cause some really severe psychological or just sleep and psychological disorders. So yeah. Another interesting thing, speaking of psychological disorders, to think about when talking about sleep paralysis is how it can be affected by a psychological disorder. So, people with disorders like panic disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder have mainly been those who report going through things like feeling like they're being attacked in their sleep or assaulted. So that could definitely, that has some interesting correlations when you think about it between the two, between sleep paralysis and certain psychological disorders. And yeah, so it's really interesting to think about that. And another thing that's really interesting to consider when we're talking about sleep paralysis is how our perspective on it has changed throughout our history. So back in the old days, back in like the 1600s, when the whole Salem witch trials thing was going on, sleep paralysis, well, what we presume to be sleep paralysis, played a pretty major part in the panic of that time, because people would report that in their sleep they were being attacked by spirits or demons and stuff like that. They'd report that they couldn't move, and these things would just be there, like scaring them or even attacking them. So it's interesting if you think about it, because how much of the witch trials were caused because of sleep paralysis, and how much of the panic was caused because of sleep paralysis. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing to think about. And one other interesting thing to think about when thinking about sleep paralysis are how it's affected our myths. So if you look online, there's tons of myths of sleep demons or sleep spirits that attack you in your sleep. And most of these reports of like people experiencing coming up against these entities can be brought back to sleep paralysis, because they describe not being able to move, waking up in the middle of the night, being paralyzed, and just seeing that spirit or whatever it is they report encountering attacking them. So yeah, it's really interesting to think about how much of our history in terms of the supernatural and the Salem witch trials and all that has been affected by sleep paralysis.
Face sent. 9 minutes. 9 minutes. Face sent. Stop. Take picture. Take picture. Take. Stop recording video.